I think I did this especially for Morocco and Turkey because a lot of people, had very strong opinions about Turkey and Morocco going as a solo female. So I think I was quite scared. And then I got a lot of information about that. And I'm also very thankful about this. And I also was hosted sometimes by people who went to Morocco and Turkey. And I was really interested and asked a lot of questions. I was quite scared. It's funny how there's this certain country and it kind of scares you and you're so focused on it and then you want to learn everything about it and then you've been there and you liked it a lot. It's never as bad as people tell you it's going to be, I think.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Rieke Schmees. In 2022, Rieke set off on a bicycle adventure which would see her leave the familiarity of home in Germany behind. She set out to explore new countries and cultures through Europe and Morocco before heading for her end destination in Turkey. By the time she'd finished, Rieke had travelled 12,000 kilometres through 16 countries. But as with many other guests who have undertaken long-distance bike travel, these journeys are so much more than numbers, and I can tell that it was the experiences built up across each day of this trip which have most likely left a lasting impression on Rieke. No doubt this is an adventure highlighted with beautiful landscapes, an exploration of different cultures, and maybe perhaps a realisation of what is possible to achieve when travelling solo on a bicycle for so long, day after day after day. I'm really looking forward to exploring these topics and so much more with Rieke today as we learn about her incredible journey. Rieke, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bella. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to speak with you, Rieke. Fans of the show, you may recognise this name because I have actually shared one day of your trip excerpt from Rieke before in our midweek Cycle Shorts episodes. And from the little insights I gained from that, I'm super excited to delve even deeper into your story, Rieke. But a question which I start my show with, and I ask this of all my guests, is, Rieke, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I have to admit, I don't remember it myself, but I asked my mom about it and she said that the first bike I had, it was a bike with 3 wheels and I was around 4 years old. And my mom told me that she was quite fascinated that when I learned riding a bike with this bike, I was very persistent and every time I would fall off the bike, I would be extremely eager to get back on the bike again. And she said she was very surprised by my strong persistence and willpower as a kid when it comes to riding a bike. And I think that's very funny considering that now the bike gives me so much meaning in life. So, yeah.
I love these insights, Rieke. It's funny, whenever I ask this question, I get a myriad of different types of answers. But often it's like a little clue into just what your personality was like then and how it's developed, but also your relationship with bicycle travel. And it sounds like your mother said there, the willpower to persevere there on 3 wheels initially, but now the bike is a big feature of your life. Obviously, it sounds like you mastered the 3-wheeled bike pretty quickly. I imagine you went on to riding bikes throughout your childhood, but did you keep riding bikes when you were, growing up as a teenager as well? Or is cycling day in, day out, is that something that you've really only just picked up again as an adult?
No, I was always riding my bike. So I'm from a place in Germany that it's considered the bike capital. And I also lived in the Netherlands for 5 years. And I mean, the Netherlands is a bike country, right? So
totally.
I always loved riding my bike. So yeah, I've always done it.
I mean, the Netherlands, I think there's more bikes than people there. I don't know if that's the Netherlands as a whole or just Amsterdam, perhaps. But you are right. It is a cycling country. I must admit, I have to ask you, where in Germany are you that's known as the bike capital of Germany? Where were you referring to there?
Münster. It's in the northwest.
Is it just great like bicycle infrastructure and everything in place there?
Yes.
So cycle commuting and active travel is part and
Yeah.
parcel of living there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here in France, I'm seeing more and more of that pop up, especially in bigger cities. And it is definitely a case of the more infrastructure is there, the more people use bikes, the more people use bikes, the more people want to. So it sounds like that's been the case for you there.
Yeah.
Bikes have featured pretty prominently forever, as you say. But what about outdoors? Are you an outdoors person? Did you grow up in cities and always holiday in cities, or have you just wanted to explore outdoor places as well?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, of course, I was playing in the woods, but I didn't have many outdoor adventures. When I left for my trip, I barely really knew how to set up a tent, and I didn't even know how to use the stove, you know. And when I was younger, we mostly went on beach trips or city trips with the family. So for me, it was just choosing the outdoors because camping was a cheap way to travel, and it sounded like an adventure. And especially for someone like me who has no experience doing that, it was just perfect.
I'm going to choose a camping trip because it's cheap. I can totally get that. Absolutely 100% on board with
Yeah.
that. But a camping adventure by bike across, long distances, where did this idea come from? Like, had you done small bike packing trips or things like that before? Was some of your friends doing it? Like, where did you get the idea to go on the adventure that you ended up setting out on?
Yeah, for me, it was like back in 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit. I was in the midst of writing my master thesis. So I was about to graduate. And back at that time, I was doing two master programs in the Netherlands in psychology in two different universities. And I was doing it remotely because of COVID. And it was very stressful for me. And also, this whole pandemic situation, just everything was just very stressful. And during that time, I came across a newspaper article about a couple who has done a big bike trip. And I immediately got fascinated by this. The only thing that made me hesitate was the fact that most people who do trips like this are either men or couples. So, not many women. And then I came across solo female cyclists on social media, and then I really got inspired to do something like this. But for me, I think it was also this feeling of emptiness I had when I graduated. So, I studied something very theoretical like psychology. And I was questioning myself what I actually learned in the past years. You know, I felt that I could write solid thesis in the field of psychology, but I didn't really feel like I have any real life skills. So I don't know. I just came across this article and was like, oh my God, I want to do something like this. And yeah, and the pandemic also had me question what I actually experienced in the last years since the pandemic. And so I decided I wanted to push myself into doing something that I haven't done before and something that is completely unfamiliar to me. So heading off with a bike and a tent and a fixed budget seemed perfect for me, but it was totally out of my comfort zone. As I said, I didn't know. I just got myself this MSR tent. I didn't even know how to set it up, you know. I was very scared of using the camping stove. I'm still scared of using the camping stove. I don't know.
I get scared of using my camping stove, which is
Really?
totally, yeah, and it's totally irrational. I know how to use
Yes.
it and I know that
Yes.
it's safe, but no, I don't know what it is. I'm an anxious person, Rika.
Yes, me too. Me too. I'm also an anxious person.
And like, even though I can be doing things 100% safe, I still have this irrational fear of it's going to blow up one day. And it's not
Me
going
too.
to. We're not alone.
There are actually horror stories out there of people
There
saying that,
are.
you know, also if you don't let it cool or something like this and you turn it back on or something, I don't know, something might happen. So I don't know. I'm still scared. I was very scared back then. And yeah, I also didn't have any mechanical skills. So I just learned how to change the tube through YouTube. And I was just very scared of everything.
But not put off enough with your fears to not try. In a way, you were sort of saying you wanted to push yourself into the unfamiliarity of what you were going to be doing and you wanted to test yourself or learn things. It's definitely an element of jumping in at the deep end, as we would say in Australia. Did you then just set off, like you said, you looked at a YouTube video, for example, to learn how to change a flat tyre. Did you take small little practice trips before setting off, or was it a case of, well, that's it, I'm just going to learn as I go?
I did one with my ex-boyfriend. during COVID. It's just like a trip through Belgium, I think. Yeah, but it was not comparable. It was just staying in apartments, staying in Airbnbs. It was not really a bike trip the way I did it afterwards. And I don't know, so many people also on social media, they just kept telling, like, oh, you just gotta go. You just gotta go. Everything will be fine. So that's what I did then.
It's come up before with many of my guests, and in fact, I should actually one day take the time to sit down and tally my long distance guests up and see how many of them had set off with any experience at all and how many hadn't. Because I suspect if I did do that, probably more than I think have set off with no experience and just learnt as they went. Because it sounds like that's very much the case with you. Like you said, your first trip with your partner at the time, it sounds like what we would call a credit card style touring where you pack
Yeah.
a few clothes but you're staying in a shelter.
Yeah.
Whereas when you set off, you're camping to save money. So did you ease into the camping as well? Or were you wild camping from the start? Were you staying in campgrounds and allowing yourself a mixture of both?
At the beginning, I was not using any campsites. I was wild camping, but I was also using warm showers. And I think using warm showers at the beginning of my trip was really good because it took away my fear. Because by being in contact with other bike travelers, I learned so much, and I learned that it's okay to do this trip because you meet so many people who think it's completely crazy. Especially as a woman, people are always going to tell you all the horrible things that are going to happen. And I just wanted to be around other bike travelers. So that was really nice for me, also in order to decrease my fear at the beginning of my trip.
I think that's so smart. And again, if I reflect back on previous guest interviews, there's been a number of guests that I've interviewed who've talked about other people's fears and the wisdom in knowing who to listen to when people are telling you about things that might be dangerous or fearful or something. I think it was Steph Devery. And listeners, I've probably brought this up before, and it's entirely because it's something that she said which resonated with me and has sort of stayed with me since that. And it was to listen to advice with context. And so if someone says, don't go here, it's dangerous, but they've never been there, maybe you don't need to listen to that. But if a local's telling you about something specifically that they would definitely know about, then it's time to listen to that. So I think to flip it a bit with what you're saying, the idea of warm showers is great because you're filling yourself up with the wisdom of people with the experience of actually bike travelling as opposed to people's perception of what it might be like.
Yeah, true. I agree.
You consciously knew that that's what you were doing?
Yes. Yes.
Talk about setting yourself up for success. I like this.
But I also did like a similar thing for when I was planning my trip, for example. My idea was that to get like good equipment in order to actually commit to this bike trip. So, for example, I got myself a good bike, and I felt like the more I would spend on this bike, I mean, this is maybe a bit too much, a bit extreme to say, but the more I spend on a bike, the more likely I am to actually commit to this trip. Because I was scared that I would end up not doing it. So that's why I told myself to get good camping equipment so I would spend a lot of money on this whole thing. And I think that was a very good thing.
It was a combination of commitment. Was it not just commitment, Rieke? Was there an element of investing in something that you knew you could also rely on, perhaps? Like you were investing in the reliability of equipment too, perhaps?
Yeah, of course, but I think it was also a lot of fear. I think I also realized that I think I got all of this equipment and most of the things I got were new because of fear, because I always thought I need this. And if I don't have this, I will not have an adventure. And it's funny because sometimes I also met people on my trip. And then, for example, I think I met someone in Morocco and he was cycling with this very, very rusty decathlon bike. And he was going up the mountain. And then I think I met him while he was going down. And I remember, and I'm getting so mad at myself that I was like talking like this. But I remember I was talking to him and I was asking him like, "Oh, you went up there with this bike?" And like thinking about it now, I get so mad at myself because I just said it back then because I was so scared. I always thought you have to have like the best equipment to do this. Thinking about it now, it's just so stupid.
I don't know that it's fair to say that it's stupid because I think there would be a lot of people that feel that it's a barrier to even starting. Like, there are people who believe that you do need the most reliable tent, the most reliable bike, which means you need to spend a lot of money to get going. And of course, there's people who do it on a heavy second-hand bike. They might have spent €50 on, the chain might be rusty, and they've got a tent that's really heavy or it's not waterproof, but they're still adventuring. And I think there's extremes on both. And I don't think it's right to say one's right and one's wrong. There's definitely a perception of a barrier to entry there. And I think it's right to say that perhaps, like, you can reflect now, having had that experience, you reflect on feeling ignorant perhaps in those thoughts. But
Yeah.
I think they were valid at the time for you. So I don't think it's fair to judge yourself too much on that.
I don't know. I'm just thinking right now that people think too much, and I also thought too much. I think something that most people do is overthinking everything. And I feel like I always think, what's the worst that's going to happen? The bike breaks down. Okay, that could happen. But, you can still have an adventure. Of course, it's nice to invest in good quality gear. But I don't know. I remember I got so thinking about it now, I have a different view on that. Yeah.
If you knew what you know now, having done what you did, what do you think you would change at the start? Like, you still went on this adventure, so you obviously did a lot of things right. But
Oh, yeah.
what did you think were barriers that you took your time about setting off and getting right before you set off that you wouldn't even think twice about now?
Maybe I would have taken a different route because I went to Spain. Went south to France, Spain, Portugal, Morocco, and then I went back to the Balkans, or Italy, and then the Balkans, and then Turkey. And I think I went to Spain because it was comfortable, because I've been to Spain before. And then when I was in Spain, I was like, oh, I could also go. Or when I was in Portugal, I was like, oh, I could also go to Morocco. But before that, I was so scared of everything. And I don't know, like I crossed the Alps in Austria. But actually, my first idea was to go to Switzerland because I've never been to Switzerland. But then people were telling me, oh, you can't go to Switzerland because, like, it's way harder to cross the Alps in Switzerland than in Austria. So people were always telling me those things and all their fears. And I think I was very much influenced by that.
It's interesting because there's two things I think about that. Well, my first initial reaction is, when you said you went to Spain first because it felt comfortable, is there also an element of, we have a saying where you need to walk before you can run? And so you're setting out on this journey. Is it okay to sort of grow into it and grow your confidence?
Yeah, that's true.
You reflect back with the experience built up on what you've done now, saying, I would do it so differently. But in a way, perhaps you needed to do it this way so that you can feel confident to do it differently if you go on another adventure.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe.
When I came across your story, Rieke, it was something that struck me was, hang on, you went from Germany to Morocco and then you went over to Italy. And I was thinking, oh, this is an interesting route. I wonder what the story is behind how that worked out. Because one of the questions I did have for you there was, how did this adventure map out for you? Like, did you set off from Germany thinking you would go the way that you ended up going, or did you change tact? Tell me about that.
No, I was actually I had no plan, really. And I was thinking to myself, I would just go south. So I was thinking of going to Spain because I was starting in August. So I thought, oh, Spain is nice because the weather is nice. But I was very scared. So I don't think at that time I thought I would never make it there. So I would always just have sub goals. For example, my first goal was Munich. And of course, also when you meet people on the road, you can't tell them right away, hey, I'm going to Barcelona. People are going to laugh at you. You really have to be aware of what you tell people because you give people the power to, judge you and maybe influence you. My first idea was to go to Munich to visit my stepdad. And then I wanted to cross the Alps, but I was totally convinced I'm never going to cross the Alps because of the baggage. And I didn't really exercise much before. I was not really fit. Even also in Germany, I had some encounters with people that made me really anxious to keep going. And when I was somewhere in rural Germany, I met this guy and he was in his 80s and he was a marathon runner. And
Wow.
he was running next to me. And this guy was crazy. He was running next to me. And I got off to push my bike because everything hurt. I had pain everywhere. My legs and my knees hurt a lot. He gave me some kind of cream for my knee pain. And he told me I'm never going to make it to Munich like this. So my heart was broken. I was feeling very miserable because, so many people already told me before, you're never going to make it to Munich. It's so far to Munich, you're never going to make it. And he was like looking at me like, you're never going to make it. You can't even ride your bike. And this had me feeling like super miserable. I don't know. Sometimes I think back on this situation and I think back of, I imagine myself if I meet this guy again now and if I told him, I made it to Turkey actually, what he would actually think of that. Like you have those encounters that are very powerful that actually influence you. But I also had a really weird situation also in Germany with a guy who it was somewhere also in rural Germany, a guy who had a really thick accent, really thick dialect. And I couldn't really understand what he was saying, but he was asking me about my trip. And then he was saying that he's been watching this German crime series. We have this crime series where they talk about recent crime cases and then they set up like the people that go missing and stuff like this. And he was saying like, yeah, I've been watching this for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. I don't even know. And people like you, they always go missing. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on? Some people, they don't have any filter.
I want to call this man something I'm not allowed to say on the podcast, but anyway, keep going.
So yeah, this is also coming back to, you have to be aware of who you surround yourself with. But sometimes you don't have any choice because people come at you and they tell it to your face, straight to your face, and you can't really do anything. But I remember I was in between laughing because it was such a weird situation. It was so crazy, laughing and crying because I was very scared still. Yeah, so you have a lot of people telling you crazy things all the time. And I think it's very hard, especially as a woman. People tell you all kinds of things. And I think it's very hard, especially as a woman, to actually keep started, especially when you don't have a record yet of kilometers you've cycled. But once you've done it, once you've cycled a bit, for example, once you cycled from Germany to Spain or something like this, and people know you've done it, they put more trust in you. But I think at the beginning, it was very, very bad.
It would have been very difficult. Going back to the 80-year-old German who, power to you, mate, for running marathons at 80, but I've got some harsh words that I'd like to say about not being encouraging to someone giving an adventure a go. Lack of belief in you there, Rieke. But there's some people when people tell them they can't do something, it fires them up to really prove, well, I'm going to show you how much I can
Yeah,
do, right?
for me, it's the same.
Yeah, I wanted to know, did that sort of spur you on to keep going? Or was there an element of, did you also then have like their thoughts go into your subconscious and turn doubts into your mind? Like, did their words make you doubtful of your own ability? Or were you more spurred on to prove to them, well, actually, no, I can do it?
Yeah, I think at the beginning I was still doubting myself a lot. But then the more you keep going, you trust yourself more. And yeah, I have this personality that, whenever someone tells me something, I can't do something, it triggers me so much that I, have to do it, especially then. And it's really funny because my dad, he always kept telling me that I cannot do it. And he was always very scared, and he was like, Rieke, don't go to places, don't go to Morocco. And I remember my sister, who's probably also listening to this podcast, she
Hi,
was at
Rika,
some
sister.
she was at some point she was telling him like, Dad, what are you doing? Do you not realize that whatever you're doing, is actually pushing Rika to actually do it? And I think then he realized it a bit. Yeah.
You know how you said that it was through the act of doing that your confidence grew and you started to believe in yourself? Did you consciously realise that through your journey? Like, did you get to, can you reflect back on point in time or a country, or was it 1 month in, 2 months in, or whatever, where you go, yeah, I'm so doing this, and you were confident that you could keep going whichever way you wanted to? Like, did you have that self-awareness and belief in yourself?
Yeah, I had it in Morocco because I think Morocco was the hardest country for me because as I think it was quite hard as a solo woman cycling through Morocco because you have quite some uncomfortable situations. It's very energy draining. It was very hard for me sometimes, but I still felt like I can do it. I don't know. I still felt like it's everything. I have everything under control, and I don't know. I once listened to this, watched a video. Some I think another solo female cycling in Morocco. And I remember how she was saying something like, if you have cycled in Morocco, you are very like mentally strong or something like this. I don't remember who it was, but I really felt that. I really felt that. I feel like if I can cycle through Morocco alone on my own, I can cycle anywhere. I don't know. Maybe it's not right, but I had the feeling.
Can I ask, you said something there about how being in Morocco as a solo female, it was mentally draining in situations. What was the reasons for that? What was extra hard about Morocco from that perspective?
I think, I mean, I also have to say I've never been in a more conservative country before. I've never been out of Germany, just to the US. I also have to say that I probably also wasn't really good at adjusting to the norms and the culture very well. I think I smiled a lot at people. I smiled way too much at men, probably. I was probably too polite at some point, which sometimes can have different meanings. You know, people, men, if you smile at them, you know, they might attribute different meanings to you smiling at them.
It was more like an invitation for them to think that you were up for something more amorous or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you're just also approached a lot by men. In Europe, it doesn't really, I mean, the culture is very different. It doesn't really happen that men approach you on the streets like this. I mean, sometimes they do, but you know, it's not really common. But in Morocco, it was very often the case. And very often people want your number. I have to say, coming from a Western country, I didn't really, I was a bit overwhelmed with this sometimes. And I didn't really know what people want from me, you know. I oftentimes misinterpreted what people want from me. You know, I sometimes thought they were just nice, they just want to help you out. But then they just wanted more. So I was struggling with this. But I think I also smiled at people too much.
It's a bit sad to think that what you did wrong was be happy and smile. It's a cultural thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did you then develop a tactic, or I don't know if tactic is the right word, but with these situations, say something's happened and a man's making advances that you didn't want, and you're getting this more often than not during the day. Like, did you? I know I've spoken to other guests who've said that their tactic on this was just saying, "Oh, you know, I'm actually traveling, and my partner or my husband is up ahead of me."
Yeah.
Making it feel like you weren't alone and that you weren't single anymore, or things like that. I think I've had a guest who's worn a ring before.
Yeah, I did the same.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you do something like that? I mean, it's sad to think that you would need to, but
Yeah.
let's also just be real. Maybe you did, and that's fine, and that's what you did to get through the situation. Like,
Yeah.
when I highlight the stories of solo females, I love it because I know that there are other people and other women who are thinking of taking journeys that have probably the same fears that many of us have had before, and listen to the insights and experiences of guests so that they can believe that they can do it. And invariably, all of my solo female guests have said, do it, it's amazing, and you can do it. But I don't want this to make it feel like you're not going to have uncomfortable situations if those situations did exist. I want to be real about what actually happened. So, like you said, like you did wear a ring, or how did you
Yeah.
cope?
I actually had a fake engagement ring I got somewhere in the Medina in Fez. I remember this.
You still have it?
No, I don't have it anymore. After 2 days, it got like really like green.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And also, I feel like I wouldn't be I wouldn't be authentic anymore with this ring. But yeah, it's a good question. After this, I didn't tell anyone anymore that I have a boyfriend, or I didn't make up a story or something like that.
Yep.
What I did in Turkey actually is I have a rain cape, and it's very unsexy. Those rain capes you use
Oh,
for
yeah.
cycling.
Yeah, like a big poncho sort of almost in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I was sometimes wearing this and then also covering my hair. And I felt very unsexy, but I loved this.
I've had a previous guest, Pippa Langan. Hey Pippa, if you're listening, she travelled from the UK over across to the US. Amazing world traveller. But she did that as a tip, and I think got it from Juliana Buring, who's a well-known long-distance solo female traveller as well. And it was to make yourself not look attractive was actually a tactic. And it sounds so stupid for me to vocalise that, but it's just a legitimate way. So, and I think I remember Pippa saying exactly what you were saying, that she'd make herself puff her cheeks out so she'd look like a man or something. And it might sound ridiculous, but if it's what you feel you need to do to keep going, power to you. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I don't think it's great that you feel you need to do it, but I think it's great that you have found a way of being able to make yourself cope through situations to keep doing it.
Yeah. I also think that clothing, of course, it's not how it's supposed to be. Everyone is supposed to wear whatever they want to wear. I mean, from my perspective. But yeah, I also think that clothing also is a thing. I try to not, in certain countries, I try to not wear shorts and stuff like this. Yeah. So I think clothing is actually a big thing. You are perceived very differently if you wear light clothing. So, I mean, it's hard to when it's really hot.
Oh, I can only imagine. I was cycling today and it was really hot, and I was just in cycling kit and I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
still sweating buckets. And I've often thought about long distance travelers who I've seen in countries where they're wearing long trousers and stuff. And I
yeah,
know that you can get clothing that reflects the sun and makes you cool, but there's still an element of not suffocation, but really, really
yeah,
hot, especially in those environments. Because Morocco, people and cultures aside, it's a challenging landscape as well. You've got the heat, you've got the desert, the
yeah.
Atlas mountain range and things like that. Like, you've got lots of challenges to work through there too,
Yeah.
Rika. How did you mentally prepare yourself for things like that? You said earlier that you went through Austria because people told you Switzerland would be too hard. But going to Morocco knowing that you're going into the extremes of these sort of landscapes, what were you telling yourself at that point?
I think at some point you just learn. I mean, at the beginning, this fear of not going to Switzerland because I thought it's going to be too much for me. That was at the beginning of my trip. And when you keep going, you just gain so much confidence. And I don't know, at some point you just raise the bar. I don't know, I felt like you also get this feeling that wherever you are, there's always nice people who are going to help you if something happens.
Mm.
I don't know if you push this and keep pushing it. You arrive somewhere, in the Sahara in Morocco, and you just turn around and you're like, what happened? I don't even know how to fix a bike very well.
But you're there in the Sahara in Morocco. Like,
Yeah,
did you
yeah,
have those
yeah.
pinch me moments? You must have had those pinch me moments where you go, wow, where have I just got myself to?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I always ask myself, what the heck am I doing here? And I think a lot of travelers ask themselves this question, a lot of bike travelers, because I've also talked to other people and everyone is like posing themselves the same question. Yeah, and thinking back about this, I think that the situations where I was asking myself those things, such as for example in Morocco, there were the best situations. Yeah, in Morocco, yeah, you have a lot of challenges, I think. So I had the heat at some point, especially for me, I'm very light skinned. I feel like my body was totally overwhelmed and was just I don't know what the heck are you doing, Rika? Yeah, and you also have the dogs in Morocco, and what also happened to me is that there were so many kids in the mountains that try to steal from your bike sometimes, because there's like sometimes you cycle in the mountains and there's like 20 kids just standing there and they shout at you, they try to steal from your bike because they have nothing to do in those towns, in those villages. So you have this, and then you have like some men coming at you, so you always have a challenge. And I kind of love this, that you never know what's going to happen, and there's always a challenge. But then you also have so many positives, so it's like, for me, the positives in Morocco definitely overweigh, although it was a hard country for me to cycle through.
There's positives from different aspects because there's challenges, but you're getting them through. You're getting through them. That's a positive aspect in itself.
Yeah.
You set off on this journey because you wanted to challenge yourself. You wanted to experience more things, and you're out there doing the thing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the positive experiences then that outnumbered those challenges. Tell me about some amazing experiences in Morocco, in this challenging country that you found yourself in the Sahara, in the middle of it all.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the one situation I already explained to you, in this room with people where I felt really bad and really got, reminded of my privileges. I think that was like the turning point, because that was like the first situation where I was actually experiencing this, and not only through hearing by those things, but actually being in that situation.
Yeah, listeners, Rika's talking about her special mini episode. And in that mini episode, if I'm recalling correctly, it was in Morocco and you were invited to stay at a lovely, hospitable family's home. And then you're inside and then you're realising they don't have many possessions, but they're all offering up a veritable feast for you, and then they're making a beautiful bed for you, and they're sleeping, and you're feeling so privileged with all the things that you have on your bike.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I had so many other experiences and great experiences in Morocco. For example, I stayed with a family in Fez. I was just eating in their restaurant, and then they invited me to their home. And then I ended up working a few days in their restaurant, because they were telling me to work in the restaurant, because if there's a white woman working in that restaurant, they would get more customers. So that was very funny. I learned a lot of Darija, a lot of Moroccan Arabic also through that. That was great.
You would have had some great food too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Food always comes up in this show. And
Yes.
quickly, I need to talk about, so what sort of food was at this restaurant?
Oh, it's just like sandwiches.
Yep.
It was just like a fast food kind of restaurant, but it was good. And it was just so funny, because I don't know, I was working in this restaurant for a few days. And, this is also one of those situations where you're like, what is happening right now? I was wearing this restaurant, like this apron. And then also what I also loved about Morocco, that you can literally sleep anywhere. Like, you can ask people, you can ask everyone, you can ask anyone to sleep somewhere. So, for example, you can also ask at the police station whether you can sleep there, and they will take care of you. Sometimes I went to the police station and they would set me up in a school, in a cave. And
Sleeping in a cave in Morocco, I bet you that was an experience you didn't see when you were
yes,
planning things out, right?
yes, it was like a fishing cave. It was really nice. It was right at the beach, close to Agadir. Yeah, and then in the morning they invited me for breakfast. The police. That's really nice. So yeah, the police in Morocco were absolutely great. Yeah, I had so many great encounters in Morocco. I have to think, especially the more you go south. I don't know why that is, but most of the time in countries, I feel like the more south you go, the more hospitable people get. I remember this really funny situation. I was in the Sahara, I was near Tata. I was really bad with like planning my time. So it would be like 35 degrees and I would start my day at noon. I would always be like this. And I remember I was cycling and it was so hot and there was no shade. It was Ramadan. And I was cycling, and then there were like three ladies in the middle of nowhere, and they were just taking over the only shade that was available. And they had like a small house. And they were like getting super excited when they saw me. There was no one else around. It was in the middle of nowhere, in the middle. And they were running after me, and they were like, tea, tea, cake, cake, ate. It was so funny because, it was Ramadan and I felt really bad to accept their tea and their cake.
Because they're fasting.
Yeah, exactly. They were fasting, and I was also trying to fast during the day just out of respect. But, they really insisted me to eat all of their food and their cake and their tea. And we couldn't really communicate, but we tried to communicate with Google Translate and with a little bit of French. And they were so confused to see me. I was just solo woman traveling. They were all covered up. And it's like, what is going on, in the middle of nowhere? They saw my peg bike, and then I think they were asking me, are you married or something like that? Because they always ask you that. And then I remember I typed in the translator something like, no, I don't need a man, because I also got a little bit pissed at this question. I didn't want to respond.
Always being asked.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard. And, you always get the same questions. And they were like, where's your husband? Or do you have a husband? And I was like, no, I don't need a man. And then I remember we used the audio option. So they translated it. And then they listened to it, and then they laughed so much. It was like, so they were like, yeah, it was laughing so much. They just thought it was super funny. And then the one of the women was like, yeah, she's married, but we're not married, like something like this. And it was just so funny, those encounters. And then, of course, when I got sick in Morocco.
You were sick for a while, actually, weren't you? Like, it's not like you had food poisoning and you were knocked out for 2 days. Like, you were sick for a couple of weeks or something, wasn't it?
I was sick for 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
Yeah, I had like a flu, but I think it was also because it was so hot and my body was just going totally crazy.
Like really bad heat exhaustion or something?
I don't know. And also, I also tried to do Ramadan, so it was really not a good combination. Yeah, I don't know. I arrived in Taroudant. It was really hot and I was just feeling really sick. And then I bumped into someone. His name was Mustafa. And Mustafa invited me to his home for as long as I want. And he took care of me. And he gave me herbs so I feel better. He gave me harira soup. He gave me one room I have for myself. And as long as I wanted to stay, I could stay. And it was really nice. It was probably the best encounter I had in Morocco, because staying in this village, a very simple village, I really was able to dive into this culture, and I was really becoming part of this village because I was there for, I don't know, 3 weeks or 4 weeks even. And I was learning some Darija, I was really part of all those family traditions and stuff like this. And this really was probably the best time I had during my trip, because I learned so much. And also I learned this kindness. I was around people who would give so much to strangers. And I don't know, I had so many life lessons that I learned during this time. Also because it was a very simple village, the people there, they didn't have much. Yeah, I also was there during Eid, during the last day of Ramadan. And everything was very special to me. It was really probably the time during my trip where I learned the most things.
Do you think you'd ever go back to that village?
Oh, yeah, probably, yeah.
I've often wondered about this because I've thought this myself on my own bike travels. Rieke, hand up, I've not taken adventures as big as yours. I've travelled thousands of kilometres, but not through many, many countries at a time. But I've often thought that bike travel's perfect because it's faster than walking, but you still see and feel everything, and you're taking in the views, and it's much slower than a car or a train or a plane or anything like that. But I've often thought when I've passed through places and wondered, I wonder what life is like here. I'm sort of getting like a momentary glimpse sometimes. And it sounds to me like you had that forced rest. You weren't well, but it forced you to be in one place for a long amount of time. And another guest, it was a recent guest I interviewed, Ali Denham. Hi, Ali. He was in Peru. He had an accident that should have taken his life by all measure. He fell 30 metres down a ravine in an isolated village in Peru, and he was stuck there. And I said, what was that like? Thinking, what's it like to have broken ribs and be really ill and not being able to get to medical facilities? And he said he became best friends with everyone in the village, and it was sort of like a forced stop, and you get an insight into how people are travelling. And it almost sounds like, from lessons I've learnt from interviewing others, that with these long distance journeys, sometimes not having to go to a new place day after day after day, there's so much benefit in actually pausing somewhere to really immerse yourself. Is that you felt that obviously here in this case?
Yes, definitely.
Did you ever have longer pauses further on in your trip as well? Like, did you ever stop for 2 or 3 days or a week somewhere further along in your route?
Yeah, I think in Morocco I stopped quite a few times. I think there was so much to discover in Morocco. And also in Turkey I was sick also a few times. Yeah. But in Morocco I feel like everything was very new to me. Everything was very different. So I feel like I needed to rest a bit. Otherwise I would have gone crazy.
Yeah, is it sort of like your way of absorbing new things,
Yeah.
being stopped long enough to be able to just tone it down, reset, adjust, adapt?
Yeah. I also feel like I had to sleep way more in Morocco.
Well, a 35-degree heat.
Yeah, but also because of like all the kids, all the, there's so many things going on. People all, when they see you, they want to invite you. Sometimes it's just getting too much. They want to take you to, I don't know, places. You have to actively say no, which is a bit sad, but
That would be hard as well, wouldn't it? Like, it would be hard to
yeah.
turn down someone's hospitality, but it's also,
Yeah.
I can totally understand it. Like, it would be overwhelming at times. There are points in this journey where you are actually on a solo journey. So being on your own with your own thoughts and your own spaces, there's a point where you want that time on your own.
Yeah, true.
It's interesting. Gosh, we've talked about Morocco so much. We need to move on to other aspects of your journey as well.
Yes.
But I'd love to know, though, if I was to rewind your mind to before you set off, like your perceptions of what you were going to experience with your realities of what you were experiencing, how much research were you doing on each country you were going through before you were getting there? Like, you took this journey to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Were you preparing yourself for what your expectations would be like for, I'm going to Morocco, I should expect this. I'm going to Bulgaria,
Yeah.
I should expect this. Like, what research were you doing before you left?
Hey, awesome listeners. Are you loving what you're hearing on Seek Travel Ride? Do you want to keep the good vibes rolling? Then head over to our Buy Me a Coffee page and show your support for the podcast. Just a little virtual caffeine love can keep me brewing up the content which you adore. Click the link in the show notes, buy me a virtual coffee, and let's keep this podcast party going. Thanks, legends. Now back to the episode.
I think I did this especially for Morocco and Turkey because a lot of people, had very strong opinions about Turkey and Morocco going as a solo female. So I think I was quite scared. And then I got a lot of information about that. And I'm also very thankful about this and also very happy that I did it. I think I was quite prepared also by reading on Instagram or watching YouTube videos about other people, other females doing those things, doing this trip in Morocco or Turkey. And I also was hosted sometimes by people who went to Morocco and Turkey. And I was really interested and asked a lot of questions. I was quite scared. It's funny how there's this certain country and it kind of scares you and you're so focused on it and then you want to learn everything about it and then you've been there and you liked it a lot. It's never as bad as people tell you it's going to be, I think.
You know how you said you were seeking out solo female travellers and trying to find out their experiences to help you with your own that were to come. Did you come across many solo female travellers on your journey?
No, not really. I think it was in total like 3 or 4. And it's actually just one solo female traveler I actually met on the road, who I actually bumped into in Spain. But that's it. I was also very, very sad about it because you meet so many men and you meet so many couples. But meeting a solo female traveler, I don't know. If I would meet one, I would get so excited.
Yeah, because I want to know what your message there is as well. Like, you have been one now, and you know that there's not many of us there. Like, we're a small percentage of bicycle travellers. If you were to speak to someone who's thinking what you were thinking before they set out and they weren't sure, what would you tell them if a solo female, a beginner, pure beginner, what would you tell them?
Just go on your own. Yeah. As I said earlier, seeking advice from people, and you also said that, seek advice from people who actually know what they're talking about. Seek advice from people who've done this kind of travel. Seek advice from people who do adventurous trips. And also, a lot of people do it as a couple, right? And that's fine. But I think I also met a lot of couples, and then the women, they always ask me something like, oh my God, like, how do you do it alone? And I sometimes think it would be better to start off alone or just do like a small trip alone. And then you see that you can actually also do it on your own in case something happens and you're going to end up alone. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes you see people also like breaking up on their tours. And then I see like women kind of like panicking as if they can't do it on their own now because I've never done it in the first place. And I wish people would just try do it on their own, and when they've experienced that they can actually do it on their own, go with someone else.
If you want to be with someone else, you can.
Exactly. If you want to be with someone else, if you click with that person. I mean, this is also another thing, right? I mean, of course it's really nice to cycle with someone else, but I think it's really hard to find someone who's actually compatible to you. Yeah, just really just try to not obsess over any fears, try to not obsess over anything that's going to happen. I remember my dad was telling me before he was telling me that I should make a list of all the things that could possibly go wrong during my trip. And no, don't do that. I mean, I haven't done it, but just don't do that because it's really, I think that the hardest part is actually leaving and, leaving the comfort zone and getting started, because then you're in a totally different world than the world you have at home, because at home everyone is scared. At least this is my perception of, especially in the Western world, a lot of people are very scared. They're very much into their comfort zone. And everything that deviates from that comfort zone is something that creates some kind of fear in people. I mean, even just sleeping outside, for example, I mean, that's totally crazy to most people. And I would just say, just try, go for a weekend or something like this. Try to sleep outside and see what happens. I mean, of course, it's wise to be concerned a bit about safety. For example, if you're wild camping, I think it is wise, for example, to, hide yourself, be aware of where you're camping, watch out, are there people around there who are gonna see you. I also always carry the GPS device with me, which I don't think you have to do when you're just going on a weekend trip, but generally I think it's a wise thing to do. And just try to overcome your fears, because really it's so rewarding whatever you see when you go on a long bike trip. Not even a long, like even a short bike trip. You see the world in such a different light, and it's not as bad as all the people are trying to tell you.
Can I ask, when you were talking about, just even wild camping and sleeping outside and being on your own, when you started to when you finished, did you notice a change in you, in your confidence in wild camping?
Yes, I'm more confident, but also I feel like when I haven't done it in a long time, I get more scared again. Yes.
And every noise is like something bad.
Yes. Yes, true.
It's not really, but I'm just talking about, like, I am actually talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
me,
yeah,
not
yeah,
you
yeah,
now.
no, I
Sorry,
know.
listeners. I'm not talking about Rieke. I'm saying if I'm wild camping and I hear a noise I don't know, I'm like, my mind just goes to, this is something that's going to kill me.
No, it's the same.
When it's not.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's the same for me. But also, I think for me, for example, when I camp somewhere, I would like knot the zippers together of the tent. So I would do all those little things that would make me feel more comfortable, So whenever someone would come inside, which this is very unlikely that this is going to happen, but I would just always do all those steps. I would also always have a knife next to me in my tent and stuff like this, or the GPS device and stuff like that, which is probably way too much. But in case something ever happens, which nothing ever happened to me.
Question I often get asked, and I've seen asked by many people as well, is we were talking about security and safety, not so much for yourself now, but for your possessions. Like when you're on a bike journey, obviously securing your bike and making sure that it stays with you and doesn't magically disappear in the night with someone else. Like, what were you doing with your bike? Did you have a lock? Did you lock it? Was it in like the vestibule area of your tent? Like, what were you doing for your bike?
I was trying to put it down the tent, like put the tire down, and then I would lock it to my belongings that are like in the outer part of the tent. And then I would also attach a cup to it. I saw that somewhere that people did this, and I thought
So it
that
would
this
make
is
a
very nice.
noise.
Yeah, exactly. It would make a noise, and then just a string attached to it, so it would make a noise whenever someone tries to grab it. Yeah.
Did you ever have anything like that happen?
No.
What about like during the day as well, like resupplying? So, for example, you go into a supermarket and you need to get food and stuff. I guess it all depends on the context of the country and where you are, but were you ever concerned about your possessions being stolen while you were away from them?
Yeah, I was quite concerned, but I did have a bike alarm. That's something you can buy. I didn't use it a lot, I have to say, but it's a cool thing to use actually. But it's just whenever you activate it, it makes this really loud noise. So that's why I didn't use it. I thought it's kind of weird. But it's nice because whenever someone tries to move your bike frame, it makes a really loud noise. So that's why I used it from time to time. But other than that, I just locked it and I was fine, luckily. But yeah, I was always scared that, someone's gonna take my bike or something like that.
I think a lot of people, when they set out on these journeys, this is something that they do concern themselves with. No one wants their bike stolen. So let's move on to happier things. Actually, unexpected happier things, which probably was stressful at the time, but I when I came across this, I thought, I need to talk about this. And it's about saving a puppy in Bulgaria.
Yes.
Tell me and the listeners about the puppy in Bulgaria.
So I was camping at a church in somewhere in Bulgaria, in rural Bulgaria, and there was no one. It was just in the middle of nowhere, this church, I don't know. And there was this puppy, and that was left alone, just near the church. And yeah, I think it was just a few weeks old. It was crazy. And I was so overwhelmed because I don't know how to deal with dogs. I have to say, I mean, I like dogs, but I have no experiences with dogs whatsoever. I just had a watermelon and I had some water, and that's it. I think I myself didn't even have enough food that evening because there wasn't even stores around. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh, what do I do? And then I called my friend, and she's training to become a vet. And she was giving me advice on what I should feed the dog, and what I should do, because I was scared of rabies too. I didn't, I was like, okay, what do I do? Because I have to take care of this dog now. He was very playful, and he just wouldn't get away from me. So I took this dog, and then I camped near the church on a field. It was very cute because in the middle of the night, I obviously kept him outside the tent. And he was like snuggling up with me from outside of the tent. So he was like trying to hide under the footprint. And we were kind of like snuggling between. It was really cute. And yeah, I really didn't know what to do with this dog. And then I posted an Instagram story about, I was just asking people whether they have advice on what I should do, because I couldn't find any shelters online. And then someone reached out to me on Instagram, and she knew a shelter in Burgas. But I was in Haskovo, which is quite far away from Burgas. And she was going to connect me with the people in Burgas. And it was very uncertain whether this is actually going to take place because, there's so many stray dogs in Bulgaria. Those people were in Burgas. I was in Haskovo, like, I don't know, was like at least, 500 kilometers away or something. And so the next morning, I took this dog in my handlebar bag and we cycled to Haskovo, which was still 30 kilometers. And it was absolutely crazy because this dog was like jumping out, trying to jump out of the handlebar bag every few seconds. I didn't have much water. I was like giving the dog all of the water I had. I was feeling so sick. And then when I arrived in Haskovo and I tried to reach out to another shelter, which also it ended up not existing or something like this. It was very sketchy, everything. And then I got this message from this lady in Burgas who told me that she has a friend in Haskovo and she can take care of the dog. So that was really amazing because I was with this dog, I was in such a bad mood because I like this dog, don't get me wrong, but
Did you give the dog a name?
No, actually not.
Try not to attach yourself to the dog.
Actually, I feel like I was just so stressed out, it was just, I think, like 2 days with this dog.
It was a sense of responsibility you weren't prepared for.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I'm cycling with a baby or something like this because he was like a baby. And, sometimes you see other cyclists cycling with a dog, picking up stray dogs. And I don't know, I feel like it's this very romantic idea, it's very idolized idea of like picking up a stray dog somewhere and taking care of it. And all my friends were like, "Oh, just take care, just take it, just it's so cute, just take it." And I was like,
It is pretty cute, listeners. I've seen a photo and he's adorable.
yeah, exactly. But I was like, "Oh my God, I haven't eaten, I haven't had any water." And yeah, so I arrived in Haskovo, and this woman, she was so nice. She and her son came and picked up the dog, and they even gave me an apartment to stay in, and they even gave me a lot of food. I think the dog now is also with the family in Germany. Like,
Oh, wow, it's come to Germany. You could visit.
yeah, I don't know. I haven't really reached out to them anymore, I have to say. Yeah, it was really maybe I should do that.
Maybe that should be your next bike adventure.
Yes.
Make it happen. I want to hear all. You'll have to do like a little daily audio diary.
Yes.
Rieke meets dog. It doesn't even have a name.
And I mean, this all sounds like very negative, but
No, it's not.
I never really realized like how hard it is to cycle with a puppy. I was just so stressed out. And at some point I was just like, just someone just take him, I just want to keep going. I want to go to Istanbul now. Sounds horrible, but it was just too much. But then I arrived in this apartment and they gave me food. And the next day, the son, he drove me to the border to Turkey. It was not super far. And it was really nice because actually I didn't like Bulgaria that much, I have to say. So it was a really nice story I experienced in Bulgaria.
Something nice when your impressions perhaps were not as nice as otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
You were talking about reaching the border there in Turkey. I actually want to take you back to a different border, and that's the border in Montenegro, because I was reading about that in one of your Instagram stories, and it just sounded like an absolutely challenging day. You were at full physical limits just to get to this border. It sounded like, from what I read on your stories, it was up a mountain just to get there and stuff. And Rieke, I know you've already shared one day of your trip for a special mini episode, but I always ask my guests to tell me about one day of their trip, and I normally get them to just pick it. But I actually want you to use this day as one day of your trip, because just the little insights I had, I feel like this is going to be a mega day.
I mean, I don't really remember this day very well, I have to say.
I've set you up, haven't I?
No, I just remember going up this border crossing.
Okay, because from what I read, it was a really, really hot day. You had to reach the border crossing, which was at the top of the mountain, and you could only go a few hundred meters at a time before you were out of energy.
Yeah.
But somehow you were able to push yourself to keep going, because were there wild berries that you could eat on the side and they were your motivation?
Yeah, yes. No, it's just that I think I haven't even cycled like a lot during the day, but the thing is, I think most of the border crossings in the Balkans, they are on top of a mountain, I think. I think also in
It's almost like they're a church. Have you ever noticed that all churches are on top of a mountain?
I don't know, but like the Montenegro border is definitely on a mountain. And I think North Macedonia, I think. Yeah, I think I haven't even cycled that much during the day, but it was just going like this.
Steep.
And I don't know, I was just not prepared for this. So, yeah, and there were a lot of blackberries on the side of the road. As I said, I'm not really fit. And even though I cycled for such a long time, I still didn't feel particularly fit. And I also I am someone who likes to get off the bike and push sometimes, just for hours and hours, just push because, it's just too much, especially in the heat. And yeah, there were so many blackberry bushes. So I was just going from blackberry bush to blackberry bush because I also didn't have much food. It was in the middle of nowhere. There were not really any shops or anything, I remember. And the only thing that kept me going was those bushes of blackberries. And also the fact that whenever I would be up there, I can go down again, It's the joy. It's the joy of cycling down a mountain.
I love it. Sort of like the blackberries is like the carrot dangling in front of like the horse
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something, isn't it? It's
Exactly.
like I can get more.
Yeah.
I've had that on a cycle tour actually, where I've stopped and picked blackberries. It was not on a mountain though. It was like on the flattest flat of flats on the Velodicee Eurovelo 1 on the west coast in France. But It was full on blackberry season, and it was just like, I cannot not pick these. They're amazing. Fresh berries, there's something about them, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, I remember now that when I was on top, I think the border police, I think they offered me tea or juice or something like this. So I think they also looked me in the way like, oh, you made it up here, because that's the thing. Sometimes you arrive somewhere and you don't know, like, even though I use Komoot and it's supposed to say, how much it's going to go up and stuff.
It always goes up more.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you're like, oh, wow, this is where I'm supposed to go now. And then you feel very discouraged and you have to find something that keeps you wanting to do this.
It was actually the very first guest interview I ever did. It was for episode 1. It was Madeline Hoffman, German as well.
Oh, yeah.
She had a saying and she was like, Komoot did it again. And
yeah.
I think she had an interesting border crossing from memory. In her words, I think she was bush bashing her way across the border in Albania and thinking, my gosh, have I just crossed the border here? And what's going on? So,
oh, really?
She had some interesting tracks to negotiate there. And it's not just Komoot, everybody. Every route building app which uses OS maps, base maps, it's the same software. So you can happen on any ride with GPS, Strava, Komoot, Google Maps. But the idea that when your route that you've marked out and reality of what it actually looks like, I'm sure you've had a few moments, Rieke, did you, where you went, are you kidding me?
Yes, true.
I mean, Montenegrin border crossing on up the big mountain aside. Can you tell me about another moment of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've got to cycle here?
Oh yeah, I was somewhere in Albania, and this is also Komoot suggested this route to me, and it's near Lesha and Elbasan, so it's south of Tirana, and apparently on this stretch of the road, Komoot suggests you to go like a hiking trail or something like this. So I was on top of this mountain and there were like really big rocks. There's no way I could have cycled this. And I think it was just like 30 kilometers or something like this.
Just 30 kilometers on a hiking trail with big rocks that you can't cycle. That's not just.
Yeah, exactly. It took me all day.
I get upset when I have like a kilometer hiker bike.
I was really so stressed out because I was on top of the mountain and I couldn't even get down, with my bike because it's too heavy. I was panicking so much. And I remember I later posted it on Instagram and then other bike travelers commented like, oh, Rieke, I took the same route when I was in Albania. So now I'm kind of like every cyclist I meet who's going to cycle in Albania, I'm suggesting them to, be aware of this hiking trail.
I gotta say, Madeline, if you're listening, you have to let me know. I wonder if you know what this trail is. I bet you've done it as well.
I don't know. I just remember it like quite vividly.
Yeah. No, Madeline, Komoot, you did it again. I think other people have said they call it being Komooted. And like I said, listeners, rolls off the tongue well. You could say I've been ride with GPS'd again. Like it's just a term. All the mapping softwares do it.
Yeah.
Oh, the frustration when it happens. I hope you have the wherewithal to sort of laugh at the hilarity of the situation.
Yes.
The absurdity of it all. You have to, don't you?
I think that's important. That's really a thing that you have to... I don't think you have to have any special skills in order to do a bike trip. But I think that's something you really have to have. You have to have a frustration tolerance. You have to have like a pinch of humor in order to deal with all those situations. Because sometimes life throws at you, I don't know, crazy things.
I'm just thinking like you set off in a way seeking the crazy things of life to throw at you, didn't you? Yeah. Like you set off for challenges. Can I ask, making it to your end point and reflecting back, were the challenges that you came across what you expected them to be? Or do you feel like the goal of this whole adventure, do you feel that at the finish you met your goal?
Yes, definitely. Of course, now I want to go further in the future. I mean, I also have other bike trips planned.
Oh, I want to learn about these.
No, I mean, definitely, like not big bike trips in the way that I want to go for years.
You've got to find the puppy in Germany like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really have like specific goals. I think I just wanted to see how far I can do and what I can actually do. And I realized that I can do a lot of things. And as I said, I realized that you don't need much to do this adventure. I think what is important is to have some curiosity and have open-mindedness and, have some humor to deal with those sometimes crazy situations. But in general, I didn't have any goals per se. But I think I learned a lot from my bike trip, to put it that way.
And were some of the lessons you learned, I guess they would be unexpected ones, because you don't know what lessons you're going to learn from a bike trip, do you? But you learn about yourself, perhaps?
Exactly. You learn about yourself. I learned about myself how fearful I was before I set up on this trip. And I learned how much I'm capable of doing, and that the mindset takes a big role in that. And I learned that I was very fearful before. I was very worried about a lot of things, which, thinking about it now, just don't matter. As I said, I think you don't have to be really fit to be able to have an adventure like this. You don't have to have any crazy fancy skills. I also think what helps definitely is having some kind of rational personality, because it definitely helps you with problem solving. So, whenever destiny throws some problem at you, it's definitely good to have a problem solving mentality. But this is something you learn as you go. I think I'm much more relaxed now. I'm much more living in the moment now. I am much more thankful now. I think doing a bike trip like this, you see so many different things. You have so many life changing moments. For example, the one in Morocco, which really give you a totally different perception on life. And I am so happy that I really am in a position right now that I can make myself aware of what a good life I have every single day. So every single day I think of my bike trip, and I hope it's not gonna fade. And every single day I remind myself of like how privileged I am to have the life I have right now. Living in Germany, working as a psychologist, and also on the side, when I have vacation or something like this.
Yeah, that you can plan.
Exactly.
Like you can cross a border.
Exactly. Yeah. We have so much freedom to do whatever we want to do. And also, of course, the kindness. I learned like this kindness thing, it's a big thing for me. And I think it's a big thing for a lot of bike travelers.
1,000,000%.
It's really life changing.
It's the biggest theme that comes across all the time.
Yes, it's really life changing. And I think it also changed me in a way. I hope it changed me in the way that I'm also more kind towards others. And it's really interesting because I think before I set off on my trip, this kindness thing was not really something that was, it sounds horrible, right? But it was not something that would take up like a role in my life. I mean, of course, you get taught you have to, take care of people, you have to help out people when they need your help or something like this. But this awareness of being kind to others is just very different now. I also see situations very different. So, for example, when I see a traveler or something like this, I would ask them, how you doing? Do you need anything or something like this? Before that, I would not even think of this. And I think this is definitely interesting because I feel a bit ashamed that this is not something that was in my life before. That's not something I would consciously think of, but I'm very conscious about it now.
It's a new level of self-awareness. All these life lessons you've learned. You've learnt about your ability. You've learnt about cultures. You've learnt about other things in the world. You've learnt about gratitude, kindness overwhelmingly. It's interesting because it almost feels like there's an element of yourself, Rieke, when you talk about it that you reflect back with a sense of guilt. But I feel you should be proud of yourself to reflect forward with a sense of all these learnings that you're taking forward at shaping you how you are now.
Yeah, no, it's true. I don't think I feel guilty. It's just that I'm just wondering why this is not something that's deeply embedded in our culture, like in other cultures. You know what I'm saying? Like this just what makes me feel a bit sad because this is not something that is kind of like being taught in our culture. Like,
It's just not inherently what we're doing.
yeah,
Can't remember if I watched it or if I interviewed someone, I'm sure I have, and they said they feel everyone needs to go on a bike journey so they can learn these life lessons, because if everybody did it or hosted bike travelers, then the world would be a better place.
Exactly. I 100% agree.
And I'm just thinking about, there is that element of paying it forward. You've had so much kindness shown to you, so now you show kindness to others. And
Yeah, I hope
perhaps that rolls on. I don't know if it's a rose-tinted lens view of the world. The world is not a perfect place, sadly. But maybe each one listens to this, each one's experiences, we can do small acts that make a difference to even a part of someone's life, even momentarily during the day.
Exactly.
So many life lessons you've shared, Rieke, which have definitely impacted me, and I'm sure being reflected on the listeners hearing about you as well. If you are taking on future adventures and people want to follow along with that, what's the best way? Can people follow you? Are you on social media? Like, what's the best way of finding out whether you go and visit the dog in Germany?
Yeah, it's my Instagram account, Rieke Schmees, Riekeschm. Yeah, I don't post a lot, I think, but when I will be going on a trip again, I will definitely do so.
Listeners, I will link to Rieke's Instagram account in the show notes, and I invite you to follow her and do what I did before this interview, and it's click onto every country in her archive stories, because it sort of takes you on a beautiful little adventure through parts of her experiences, which I really, really loved. And you'll get to see a photo of this gorgeous puppy and a lot of the kind people that Rieke met along the way as well. Rieke, I really need to wrap things up here. And there's a few questions I finish my show with, which I ask everyone, so I'm naturally going to ask you as well. The first one is, if you had to pick a song to be the soundtrack to this bike adventure, to your bike adventure, what song would you pick? And the song that you choose goes on the Seek Travel Ride music playlist, available on Apple and Spotify, everybody, and it's a song chosen by every guest of the show.
That's so nice. I pick Ironic by Alanis Morissette. I don't know if you know the song. Because I love this song because it's about the irony of fate and how life throws things at you, sometimes positive and negative. And that's just how it goes. And oftentimes you find yourself in the most helpless situation, and then, something positive happens. And I really listened to the song so many times during my trip, especially when there's something crazy happening or something that I'm just laughing so much. For example, I think I also have this in my stories. I once found a lot of red peppers on the side of the road in northern Macedonia. And they were just dumped there. And, I tried them and they tasted fine. And, I didn't have much food with me, And I tried them and they tasted fine and they looked good, whatever. And I filled my bags with those peppers, with those red peppers. And I remember I took a pause and I was sitting on the side of the road and I was listening to the song because I was like, what is happening? Why are why? Who dumped those precious, wonderful peppers on the side of the road? And why did I happen to take this road right now, And so this song is something that really, I was listening to this song so many times.
So whenever you hear it now, it'll take you back to just random moments of your journey.
Yes, exactly. And I do think that this song is very suitable for bike trips because it's really about this, what fate throws at you. I mean, of course, there's a lot of negative situations, but I think there was this line, it's the good advice that you just didn't take, and who would have thought it figures. And especially because I had so many people telling me oh my God, you're going to get kidnapped there. You're going to, this is going to happen to you and this is going to happen to you. And this is why I think it sits very well.
I love that twist. Oh, that's brilliant. Okay. Ironic, Alanis Morissette, you're on the playlist. Last two questions, Rieke.
Amazing.
The first one, you're given a choice one day. You can pedal in one direction and it will be forever up a really hard, constant hill climb. Or you can go in the total opposite direction, but you're going to be facing a constant, really hard headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
Oh, I think then the first direction with the climb.
The climb. You're a climber.
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't know whether you would choose the climb when you were telling me how you really hated and you had to walk the bike up.
Yeah, exactly. I hate it, but I also hate headwinds. So, I mean, if I can go with a more minimalistic setup, then I would choose the first.
Team hill climb, most people choose team hill climb. It's fine. So it'll be interesting to see whether you change your setup for your future adventures, actually.
I hope so. I hope so.
Final question. You have a choice and you're just riding for 4 hours one day, and you can choose to ride 4 hours on your own or 4 hours with other people. What will you choose?
That's hard.
I asked the tough ones.
I think it's really hard because it just depends on the people. Probably I would choose the people because after the 4 hours I can still go on my own again if I feel like we're not compatible. So I think I would use the people because then I have the choice again afterwards, you know.
I've had a few people do this to me where they've chosen the people because they know at the end of it they can be on their own. And I've always wondered, does that really actually mean that they do want to be on their own but they don't want to vocalize the fact that they want to be on their own? But you're a psychologist and I'm going to leave that thought with you.
I mean, I like to be with people, but it depends on what kind of people, of course, and it depends.
Not necessarily when you ride your bike, right? Sometimes people ride their bike on purpose on their own to clear their head, clear their thoughts, be with themselves. There's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
You're allowed to choose to be with the people.
Yeah, I think, as I said, it depends. It depends.
Well, wow, what an amazing adventure you've had, Rieke. And I feel like with many of my guests during this interview, we've only been able to glimpse on the surface of it. But also equally, I feel like I've learnt your life lessons from this journey too. You've shared so much with us here as well. Things like curiosity, open-mindedness, the type of advice you listen to, and the self-assuredness of learning about your own abilities. It sounds like when you decided on this adventure to camp because it was cheap, to get the right gear so that it forces you to commit to it, you were there looking for something that taught you lessons, that put you out of your comfort zone. And it sounds to me like you reached your end goal and you met all those expectations and so much more. You gave yourself the beautiful gift of learning about the world and learning about kindness and paying it forward. Rieke Schmees, thank you so, so much for sharing your stories and experiences here for an episode for our listeners on Seek Travel Ride.
Thank you so, so much, Bella. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Listeners, I feel like I nearly say this at the end of every episode. I guess it's because it's true. I just feel so energised having spoken to Rieke there, and I feel energised often speaking to many of my guests. Often when I listen to the experiences and the stories that my guests recount during the interview, it takes me on a journey, but I learn so much as well. And I really felt a lot of the learnings that Rieke was sharing deeply for myself. I think it possibly stems from the idea that I'm at a stage where I think about taking some solo trips, and how she was feeling about doing things at the start are the very things that I think about myself. But also broadly, and this applies, you don't need to be a female for this to apply, but it's just more broadly the lessons that she's learned from taking a solo journey. And it's lessons about yourself, the self-assuredness to understand that actually you don't need all the things, you don't need all the fitness, and you do actually have the skills you need to cope with the happenstance of life and the challenges that will come your way. You go on a solo journey or a bike adventure, things will happen that were unexpected, but somehow we're able to get through and deal with them. And I felt this deeply with Rieke. Something else that she also spoke about was about needing that flexibility and open-mindedness with a sense of humour as well to get yourself through those crazy moments. Sometimes crazy moments are going to happen on a bike journey, and when they're stressful, it can be hard to find the situation funny. But the idea that you need to have a pinch of salt, a sense of humour to laugh at situations to help get you through, I thought that was a brilliant coping mechanism as well. I learnt so much there also about gratitude and kindness, which I feel I'm learning with each and every guest interview. And if you're a regular listener to the show, no doubt that is the key takeaway that you've taken from hearing the stories of those long-distance bicycle travellers as well. Thanks so much, Rieke. I loved learning all these lessons from you. Now, if you are enjoying Seek Travel Ride and you would like to help the show, a quick and easy way to do that is to hit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. You can show a little bit of gratitude to this independent podcast and help me out with a small financial donation, which goes towards the running costs of the show. Thank you so much to all of you who are supporting the show already on Buy Me a Coffee. I appreciate each and every one of you. And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.